Hey everyone, this is Mark Hammonds from Mobile Tuts Plus, and today we're going to be covering the MediaPlayer controller class and the MediaPlayer framework. Specifically, I'll be teaching you how to incorporate videos into your applications using the QuickTime player, and the example app that we've built today is called Moonwalk because we're actually going to show footage of the Apollo 11 moonwalk landing. This is free footage. It's available from the NASA website, so it's included in the downloaded package. And after you load the app, it'll look something like this. You'll be able to click launch, and the video will begin to play. You should be familiar with this interface from the YouTube application. It's pretty standard. And along the way today, we're also going to cover NS Notification Center a bit and give you a brief introduction to that. We're going to talk about NSLog and how to log messages to the console, in case you didn't already know. And we'll also cover how to hunt down and resolve a memory leak. So without further ado, let's get started. Let's begin by firing up Xcode. And we'll select Create New Xcode Project. And then because this application only uses a single view controller, we can select View-Based Application from the Templates menu. And we'll call this tutorial Moonwalk. Alright, so we have our basic Xcode template as the default classes and resources and frameworks. It's important to realize that iOS devices are incompatible with many of the common video formats and codecs available for laptops and desktops. What this means is that you can be watching a video on your Mac laptop, but when you try to install it in an iPhone application or even just port it to your iPhone, it'll be unable to play the video. The solution is simple. You just have to make sure that the file you have is compatible with the device, and the best way to do that is to go to the Apple website. And then you can browse to either the iPhone or iPad or whatever device you're looking to target, and the thing to look for are the technical specifications. There's a lot of great information in general on these pages that you should be familiar with and kind of review to make sure you understand, but the thing to look for specifically is TV and video. This block will tell you all the video formats that are supported, leaving the only trick and the purpose of this step to understand how to get from an unsupported file type to a supported file type. There are a lot of different ways to do that. You can use QuickTime. It has a special export for iPhone function, as does iMovie, but my recommendation is just to use iTunes. So if you open iTunes, this is an unsupported file type that is very large and needs to be both optimized and converted to a file type compatible with the iPhone. So the way to do that is to go to the iTunes menu bar, which you can't see on this screen, but select Advanced and then scroll down and select Create iPod or iPhone version. And that will both convert and optimize the video for your iPod or iPhone device, and you can then use it in your applications. After the conversion process is complete, you can actually find it really quickly by right-clicking or control-clicking and selecting Show in Finder. Now, I ran this conversion earlier. You can't see the new file in iTunes, but this was actually the result of the conversion. It's our moon landing video that we will integrate in the application very shortly. So with our new file, we're ready to move on to importing the resources into our Xcode project. This step is quite simple. We're just going to be importing the resources that our application will use into the actual Xcode project. And to give you an overview, we are going to be using a custom background in our view controller, a pressed and unpressed state of a custom button, and the actual moonwalk landing video. So normally what I do is I actually like to create groups for each of the file types that I'm going to be storing in the application to keep things organized. So I'm going to create a group for images, and I'm going to create a group for videos. I'm going to drag in just the images. And this is the only potentially tricky part here, is that you have to be sure that you select this copy items into destinations groups folder if you want to actually store those files in the same directory as the Xcode project. And in this case, we definitely want to do that, because otherwise when the application gets compiled in the linking phase, it will be looking for files that will not exist on the iPhone. Interestingly enough, they obviously will still exist on your file system, so you will be able to run the application in the simulator and have it work correctly, and then you'll get to pull your hair out when it doesn't work on the iPhone, or when select images do not show up. So I've run into that problem, and it was because I forgot to do this one simple thing. So just be sure that if you need to copy a file in, that you actually select that to make sure that it happens. After you've added your assets, image assets, move on to the video. And it's the same process. Alright, so now we should be good to go. In this step, we're going to begin by adding the MediaPlayer framework into our project. And we do that by selecting frameworks, right-clicking, selecting Add, Existing Frameworks. And now we have a list of the different frameworks that are available with the iPhone SDK. And so just scroll down and find MediaPlayer.framework and click Add. Alright, so now that that's in our project, we're finally ready to begin coding after all that lead up. So go to Moon WalkViewController.h, and we want to import the framework that we just added. Okay, so the framework is now going to be accessible to our code in the View Controller, and we want to go ahead and also add in a method prototype for our play function, and that's what's going to actually launch the media player after a button is clicked in our interface. So let's define that as being of the IBAction type. IBAction is actually the same as void in terms of how the compiler views it. It's really just a tag for Interface Builder to know where connections can be made within your code. So we're going to call our method play, simple enough, and with that in place, we have completed the step. In this step, we're going to lay out our interface and configure it with our custom graphics. So go ahead and double click on Moon WalkViewController.zib in the Groups and Files pane, and that will launch Interface Builder. Alright, so the first thing we want to do is we want to add our background image into the view. You can do that by dragging in UI image. You can actually just let it go ahead and scale to the proper size. And then in the inspector, we're going to put bg_main.jpg. And there you have the background. So now let's get a UI button, drag that on. We're going to make this of custom type so that it doesn't use any of the default graphics. And we want to go ahead and set the default state configuration, notice that right here, to button launch up. Alright, so now we obviously need to size this appropriately. And a quick way to do that is to press Command equals, and that will fill the bounds of the button to the size of the graphic that you're using. So that looks good. The placement actually looks pretty good too. So now we need to set the pressed state of the button for what the button should change to when someone actually taps it. And to do that, you just go to default state configuration, change that to highlighted state configuration, button launch down, and do the same for selected state configuration. Button launch down. Alright, if we had a disabled state, you could obviously set that as well, and when you made the button or the element disabled, it would display that custom image. You can do that programmatically. So we almost have our interface completed. Next thing to do is to right-click on the button and come down to touch up inside. Okay, we're going to drag that over to Files Owner, and we see the play method that we defined a prototype for earlier with the IB action. So it's that IB action tag that's actually allowing this to happen right now. Go ahead and select that, and you can see the relationship is now defined between these two items. And when you click on it, or I'm sorry, when you tap on it, touch up inside event, it will fire that method. So all you have to do now is press Command S or File Save to save your changes in Interface Builder, and we're ready to begin coding again. Okay, we are now going to implement the play method that we defined earlier, and this is actually the heart of our program. So go to Moon WalkViewController.h, and we can actually just put the method right at the top here. I normally put this further down in the code, but as it's such a simple application, it's not necessary. So it's IB action play. The first thing that we need to do is create a string with the file path to our Moonwalk video. So to do that, create NSString video file path, and we'll use the NSBundle class to get the path for the resource that we have in our project. And this is actually going to be the title of the video, which in our case is Moonwalk, but no extension. And then our type is going to be an M4V file. And to verify that, we're going to use nslog. We're going to say file path is video file path, and that will print out in our console the full-length path that we just generated. Now what if you provide the wrong file type or the wrong file name or something like that? It's nice to have some error catching code in that event. Maybe the file was deleted from the iPhone even. It's not very likely that it would happen, but just in case, we can do if video file path is equal to null, then handle errors. I'm not going to get into that in this tutorial, but it's something to be mindful of. What I will say is that in any case where you're in a function like this that's only going to be called once and you only want it to continue execution if these conditions are met, you can simply say return if an error is encountered, and that will return the function at this point in the code and nothing else will be executed. So with our error handling in place, we can now create an NSURL called video URL with the full file path. So this is an interesting point where NSURL can either be a local file path or an HTTP reference. In our case, obviously it's a local file path, and we'll just continue from there. File URL with path, and we want to use video file path. Alright, so we've now created our URL, and we want to begin using our main class for this application, MediaPlayer controller. We're going to create a new movie player controller called movie. We need to allocate it in memory. And init with the contents of the URL that we just generated. Now, after you've allocated your movie player controller, to play the video, all you actually have to do is say movie play. Alright, so we need to close our function now. And if we save and run our application, we should actually find that everything loads correctly without any errors. And we can actually launch the video. So this is now playing from the local file store.
At the foot of the ladder, the lamp foot beds are only
kind of cool.
depressed in the surface about.
So we're going to go ahead and say done there, and we now have a working application. But it is working with memory leaks. I don't know if you caught that earlier. We allocate the MP movie player controller here, and we never release it. So that means it's still going to be retained in memory even after the movie completes. And what we have to do to compensate for this is we have to get notified by the application, because we don't control that video playback. We have to set up a notification so that the application will tell us when the playing has been completed. Now that we have our video playing successfully, in this step we're going to go back into the code and we're going to subscribe to a notification for when the video completes playing so that we know to release the movie object that we allocated earlier. This is very important to prevent memory leaks from occurring, and unfortunately the scope of this tutorial won't cover all the ins and outs of NS Notification Center, but suffice to say that NS Notification Center is an object that will broadcast messages to your applications when a certain event occurs. The trick is that you have to first subscribe to that message in order to receive it later, and you have to create your own function to specify what will happen when the notification is received. So let's begin just by subscribing to the NS Notification Center object to tell it what notification we want to receive. We're going to add an observer of self because we want it to be broadcast here. And the selector is equivalent to the function that we want called. We're going to use the function playback finished callback. Be sure to add that colon at the end there. Alright. The name, this is the name of the notification that we would like to receive in our app. And this is going to be MP Movie Player Playback did finish notification. So that's the unique key that identifies the message that we want to receive and is triggered when movie playing completes. There are several other keys that you can subscribe to as it relates to the movie player controller. You'll just have to look at the Apple documentation to see all the options there if you're interested. Right now we're going to move on. And the object that we're using is movie. So what we're doing here is we're actually saying that this movie object, which is of type MP Movie Player Controller, that's the object that's going to be sending the messages that we want to receive. And one of the messages that it sends is MP Movie Player Playback did finish notification. So with that in place, we need to now define the selector method. We can actually do that right here. This is going to be a void return type, and our name is playback finished callback, and we actually will accept a parameter of NS notification. That's why you had to put the colon up above. And we'll call this notification. Alright, so now we want to get a reference to the MediaPlayer controller object that we created earlier. So we're going to create a new pointer to the same, or with the same name, and we're going to assign it to notification, which is the object we just received, object. And so that is the object that sent the notification, that's right here, which we allocate above. And now we have a pointer that's referencing that in our code in the callback, which makes it really easy to release it. But we can't do that just yet. We actually first want to remove our observer from the notification center. So type in remove observer self name MediaPlayer playback did finish notification. It's the key of the notification. And the object is movie, which we define above. And that's going to take this notification out of the notification center and say we don't need to receive this anymore at this time. And now we're ready to actually release that object that we allocated earlier. And with this code in place, you actually have a fully functional application. I know that the notification center stuff is probably a bit confusing if you're a beginner. Hold in there, and we will cover that in more detail in a future tutorial. But for now, you can basically just copy and paste this, or do a bit more research online or in the Apple documentation to figure out exactly what's happening there. Now I'd like to just compile and run this one more time to make sure that there aren't any errors. And sure enough, it seems to load okay. Launch that application, you can see the video is still playing.
At the foot of the ladder.
One more thing that I'll throw in at this point is that earlier we used nslog to print out what the full file path was. So what I like to do to monitor this is hit GDB, and that gives us the console. And you can see here that the file path is part of the text was printed out, but I did make a mistake in the earlier step. And what I did not specify was what kind of an object to expect to print interpolated in this string. So you actually send in a formatter, which is %A, and that says that you want to print out an object, an Objective-C object. And in this case, that object is an NS string video file path. So if you compile and run the application again, and click launch, and go to GDB, you'll now see that our nslog statement did print out the full file path to the file. Alright, so we have a working application. It doesn't have any memory leaks, and you're good to go.